a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. György Dózsa. György Dózsa was a Székely man-at-arms from Transylvania, Kingdom of Hungary, who led a peasants' revolt against the kingdom's landed nobility. He was eventually caught, tortured, and executed along with his followers, and remembered as both a Christian martyr and a dangerous criminal. During the reign of King Vladislas II of Hungary, royal power declined in favour of the magnates, who used their power to curtail the peasants' freedom. From peasant crusade to rebellion, Dózsa was born in Dank. During the wars against the Ottoman Empire, he was a soldier of fortune who won a reputation for valour. In 1514, the Hungarian Chancellor, Tamás Békés, returned from the Holy See with a papal bull issued by Leo X authorizing a crusade against the Ottomans. He appointed Dózsa to organize and direct the movement. Within a few weeks, Dózsa had gathered an army of some 40,000 so-called hajdu, consisting for the most part of peasants, wandering students, friars, and parish priests, some of the lowest-ranking groups of medieval society. They assembled in their counties, and by the time he had provided them with some military training, they began to air the grievances of their status. No measures had been taken to supply these voluntary crusaders with food or clothing. As harvest time approached, the landlords commanded them to return to reap the fields, and, on their refusing to do so, proceeded to maltreat their wives and families, and set their armed retainers upon the local peasantry. The volunteers became increasingly angry at the failure of the nobility to provide military leadership. The rebellious, anti-landlord sentiment of these crusaders became apparent during their march across the Great Hungarian Plain, and Békés cancelled the campaign. The movement was thus diverted from its original object, and the peasants and their leaders began a war of vengeance against the landlords. Growing rebellion. By this time, Dózsa was losing control of the people under his command, who had fallen under the influence of the parson of Skuld, Lorink Misharos. The rebellion became more dangerous when the towns joined on the side of the peasants. In Buda and elsewhere, the cavalry sent against the courts were unhorsed as they passed through the gates. The rebellion spread quickly, principally in the central or purely Magyar provinces, where hundreds of manor houses and castles were burnt and thousands of the gentry killed by impalement, crucifixion, and other methods. Dózsa's camp at Skuld was the centre of the jacquerie, as all raids in the surrounding area started out from there. In reaction, the papal bull was revoked, and King Vladislas II issued a proclamation commanding the peasantry to return to their homes under pain of death. By this time, the uprising had attained the dimensions of a revolution. All the vassals of the kingdom were called out against it, and soldiers of fortune were hired in haste from the Republic of Venice, Bohemia and the Holy Roman Empire. Meanwhile, Dózsa had captured the city and fortress of Charnad, and signalled his victory by impaling the bishop and the castellan. Subsequently, at Arad, Lord Treasurer Ristava Intellecti was seized and tortured to death. In general, however, the rebels only executed particularly vicious or greedy noblemen. Those who freely submitted were released on parole. Dózsa not only never broke his given word, but frequently assisted the escape of fugitives. He was unable to consistently control his followers, however, and many of them hunted down rivals. Downfall and execution. In the course of the summer, Dózsa seized the fortresses of Arad, Lipa, and Vilagos, and provided himself with cannons and trained gunners. One of his bands advanced to within 25 kilometers of the capital, but his alarmed ploughmen were outmatched by the heavy cavalry of the nobles. Dózsa himself had apparently become demoralized by success. After Charnad, he issued proclamations which can be described as millenarian. As his suppression had become a political necessity, Dózsa was routed at Temesvar by an army of 20,000 led by John Zapalia and István Báthory. He was captured after the battle, and condemned to sit on a smouldering, heated iron throne, and forced to wear a heated iron crown and scepter. While he was suffering, a procession of 9 fellow rebels who had been starved beforehand were led to this throne. In the lead was Dózsa's younger brother, György, who was cut in 3 despite Dózsa asking for György to be spared. Next, executioners removed some pliers from a fire and forced them into Dózsa's skin. After tearing his flesh, the remaining rebels were ordered to bite spots where the hot pliers had been inserted and to swallow the flesh. The 3 or 4 who refused were simply cut up, prompting the others to comply. In the end, Dózsa died from the ordeal, while the rebels who obeyed were released and left alone. The revolt was repressed, but some 70,000 peasants were tortured. György's execution and the brutal suppression of the peasants greatly aided the 1526 Ottoman invasion, as the Hungarians were no longer a politically united people. Another consequence was the creation of new laws, an effort in the Hungarian Diet led by István Werboczy. The resulting tripartitum elaborated the old rights of peasants, but also greatly enhanced the status of lesser nobility, erecting an iron curtain between Hungarians until 1848, when serfdom was abolished. Legacy. Today, on the site of the martyrdom of the Hot Throne, there is the statue of the Virgin Mary, built by architect Laszlo Székely and sculptor György Kiss. According to the legend, during György Dózsa's torture, some monks saw in his ear the image of Mary. The first statue was raised in 1865, with the actual monument raised in 1906. Hungarian opera composer Ferenc Erkel wrote an opera, Dózsa György, about him. His revolutionary image and Transylvanian background were drawn upon during the communist regime of György Dózsa. The Hungarian component of his movement was downplayed, but its strong anti-feudal character was emphasized. In Budapest, a square, a busy 6-lane avenue, and a metro station bear his name, and it is one of the most popular street names in Hungarian villages. A number of streets in several cities of Romania were named György Dózsa. Also, a number of streets in several cities of Serbia were named Ulica Dózsa Dida. 2 postage stamps were issued in his honor by Hungary on the 12th of June 1919 and on the 15th of March 1947. The latter in the Social Revolutionists series. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?